Ethiopia, a new alliance is emerging, one that could reshape the region's destiny for generations to come. This alliance stands at a crossroads, holding the promise of stability but also the threat of igniting a devastating conflict that could engulf the entire region. Somalia and Eritrea, once wary neighbors with a history of mistrust, are now bound together by a common concern: Ethiopia's rapidly expanding ambitions and its quest for access to the Red Sea. Their partnership goes far beyond traditional diplomacy. It is a calculated, strategic response to what they see as a direct challenge to their sovereignty and security. Presidents Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and Isaias Afwerki have forged a pact, sending a clear and unmistakable message to Addis Ababa. Somalia's borders are not up for negotiation, and any attempt to redraw the map will be met with unified resistance. What began as a diplomatic overture has quickly evolved into a robust political and military bloc, directly challenging Ethiopia's long-standing dominance in the Horn. Tensions are running high, with military posturing and troop movements turning what was once a diplomatic standoff into a potential flashpoint for open conflict. Observers and analysts across the globe are watching closely, asking, will this new alliance serve as a deterrent to Ethiopia's ambitions? Or will it be the spark that triggers a war the region simply cannot afford? The Horn's history is littered with the ruins of past conflicts, wars that spiraled out of control, leaving deep scars on the land and its people. The choices made today will shape the fate of millions, determining whether the region moves toward peace or plunges back into chaos. For Somalia, this is a fight for sovereignty and the right to determine its own future, free from external pressure or interference. For Eritrea, it is an opportunity to counterbalance Ethiopia's influence and assert its own role as a regional power. For Ethiopia, the stakes are existential. A landlocked nation's struggle for access to the sea, vital for its economic survival and national pride. As these powerful forces collide, the world watches with bated breath, anxious that the fragile peace so painstakingly built may soon shatter, sending shockwaves far beyond the Horn. The Horn of Africa stands at a pivotal crossroads, its future uncertain, and the consequences of today's decisions poised to ripple across continents and generations. The Somalia Eritrea alliance has rapidly moved from diplomacy to a formidable political and military front. Eritrea's unwavering support for Somalia's sovereignty became clear when Ethiopia struck a controversial deal with Somaliland. Eritrea has trained thousands of Somali soldiers, strengthening Somalia's fight against Al-Shabaab and bolstering its eastern flank. This military cooperation is a strategic investment, creating a two-front challenge for Ethiopia. Economically, the alliance is exploring joint infrastructure and trade, focusing on maritime security and mutual respect for borders. The Ankara Declaration, with Egypt's support, pressured Ethiopia to respect Somalia's territorial integrity, a major diplomatic win. The bloc's message is clear. Ethiopia's quest for sea access will be met with unified resistance. A new balance of power is taking shape in the Horn. The Red Sea is a vital artery for global trade, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean and serving as a crucial shortcut between Europe, Asia, and Africa. Every year, nearly 12% of world commerce, ranging from oil and gas to manufactured goods, passes through its narrow waters, making it one of the busiest and most strategic maritime corridors on the planet. Any disruption here, whether from armed conflict, piracy, or political instability, can send shockwaves through international markets, causing delays, price spikes, and uncertainty for businesses and consumers worldwide. For the nations of the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea is more than just a trade route. It's a lifeline that brings economic opportunity, jobs, and vital revenue streams. Control of key ports like Djibouti, Assab, and Berbera means not only economic security, but also political leverage and influence over regional affairs. As a result, coastal states fiercely guard their sovereignty and maritime borders, viewing Ethiopia's demand for direct port access as a challenge to the established order and a potential threat to their own interests. The coalition of Somalia, Eritrea, and Egypt has issued strong warnings, arguing that unilateral claims or changes to port access could unravel Africa's colonial-era borders and ignite regional chaos. Their position is clear. Access to the Red Sea can be negotiated through diplomacy and mutual agreement, but national sovereignty over these waters and ports is non-negotiable. Today, the Red Sea has become a heavily militarized zone, with global and regional powers deploying warships and patrols, each seeking to protect their interests and expand their influence. Ethiopia's renewed naval ambitions and its quest for a port have added a new layer of volatility, turning what might seem like local disputes into potential international crises. In this high-stakes environment, the future of global trade and the stability of the entire region hang in the balance, making the Red Sea more important and more contested than ever before. For Ethiopia, landlocked and home to over 128 million people, sea access is an existential issue. Reliant on Djibouti for 90% of its trade, Ethiopia pays steep fees and faces strategic vulnerability. Leaders argue that a nation of its size cannot remain dependent on another for access to global markets. This anxiety drove Ethiopia's controversial deal with Somaliland, trading recognition for a 50-year lease on a stretch of coastline. The move infuriated Somalia and alarmed the region, challenging established borders. Ethiopia's rhetoric mixes calls for cooperation with warnings, leaving neighbors wary of its true intentions. The ambiguity of Ethiopia's ambitions has pushed Somalia and Eritrea into closer alliance. The region braces for the fallout of Ethiopia's bold gamble. Ethiopia's quest for sea access is matched by a dramatic military buildup. The government has re-established its navy and modernized its armed forces, signaling readiness for confrontation. Troop deployments to the Eritrean border and aggressive posturing have reignited old hostilities. Eritrea responded with nationwide mobilization, turning the border into a volatile flashpoint. Both sides see each other's moves as threats, fueling a dangerous cycle of escalation. The fear, if diplomacy fails, Ethiopia may use force to seize a port. The Horn is now a tense standoff with armies poised and the risk of war alarmingly high. The region teeters on the edge of conflict. The Horn's crisis is entangled with Egypt and Ethiopia's bitter Nile dispute. Egypt's alliance with Somalia and Eritrea is a strategic move to counter Ethiopia's regional ambitions. High-level meetings and the Ankara Declaration have formalized this anti-Ethiopian bloc. Egypt sees Ethiopia's push for a Red Sea port as another unilateral threat, echoing the dam dispute. The UAE, meanwhile, backs Ethiopia, investing in regional ports and supporting its ambitions. External powers have turned the Horn into a proxy battleground, raising the stakes and complicating peace efforts. The interests of local populations risk being overshadowed by outside ambitions. As tensions rise across the Horn of Africa, the international community is sounding the alarm, urging all parties to exercise restraint and prioritize dialogue over confrontation. The stakes are high, and the world is watching closely, hoping that cooler heads will prevail before the situation spirals out of control. The African Union, alongside the United States and the European Union, has issued strong statements calling for respect of Ethiopia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They warn that any escalation could have catastrophic consequences, not just for Ethiopia but for the entire region, potentially destabilizing neighboring countries and igniting a wider conflict. The Horn is still in the fragile process of recovering from the devastating Tigray conflict, which left deep scars on communities and infrastructure. Another war would not only reverse hard-won gains, but could plunge millions back into chaos and suffering, making recovery even more difficult. Humanitarian organizations warn that a new conflict could trigger a massive disaster, with millions at risk of displacement, hunger, and disease. Aid agencies are already stretched thin, and extremist groups are poised to exploit any chaos, threatening to further destabilize the region. Critics argue that the international response so far has been too weak and fragmented, failing to deter aggressive moves by actors on the ground. Many believe that without stronger unified action, the situation could deteriorate rapidly. The Pretoria peace agreement, once seen as a beacon of hope, now appears to be unraveling. There are growing fears that Tigray could once again become a proxy battlefield for competing interests, both local and international. Some global powers, such as China and Turkey, possess significant leverage and the ability to mediate. Yet they remain cautious, weighing their interests and hesitating to take bold steps toward de-escalation. Ethiopia's recent entry into the BRICS alliance offers a new diplomatic channel and the potential for broader international engagement. However, so far decisive intervention or coordinated action remains elusive, leaving the crisis unresolved. For now, the world watches anxiously, issuing warnings and statements, but struggling to find effective ways to prevent further escalation or to bring the parties to the negotiating table. The region stands on a knife's edge, with the threat of disaster looming ever closer. Concrete action to avert catastrophe remains limited, and uncertainty hangs heavy in the air. The next moves by both local and international actors will be critical, determining not only the fate of Ethiopia, but the future stability of the entire Horn of Africa. War in the Horn of Africa is now a real and imminent threat. Military buildups and failed diplomacy have created a powder keg. Ethiopia's internal crises add pressure for a nationalist war to unite the country. A new conflict would be fought on multiple fronts, Eritrea, Tigray, Somalia, engulfing the entire region. The human cost would be catastrophic: famine, displacement, and the collapse of decades of progress. Aid agencies would be overwhelmed, and the legacy of violence would haunt generations. The specter of war looms, threatening to plunge millions into renewed despair. The Horn of Africa faces a stark choice: diplomacy or devastation. War promises only suffering, economic ruin, and a power vacuum for extremists. The alternative is dialogue. Ethiopia must seek access through legal negotiated means. Somalia and Eritrea must consider mutually beneficial agreements. Regional and global actors must move beyond statements and actively mediate a settlement. Security guarantees, economic incentives, and a framework for port access are needed. The future rests with the region's leaders. Will they choose cooperation or confrontation? The Somalia Eritrea alliance could become a foundation for lasting security, or a trigger for wider conflict. The world is watching as the Horn stands on the brink of a defining